Hello everyone, my name is Kong Shrinani and welcome to my YouTube channel, Neuro Chat with AG. On this channel, I plan to cover topics that are closest to my heart and support the neurodiverse community. Topics related to neurodiversity, autism, late autism diagnosis, and autism in women and girls. I will interview thought leaders, esteemed researchers, scientists, professors, doctors, and psychologists and seek their views and updates on their latest work and research. I will also chat with parents of neurodiverse kids and adults and talk about experiences of neurodiverse individuals. Lastly, keeping inclusivity as a topmost priority, we might also discuss controversial disparate views for a collective understanding of issues and respect for diverse views. All the views and topics discussed are for informational purposes only. If you are interested in watching more quality content on this topic, please hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to press the bell icon to be notified whenever a new video is uploaded. Please also share the channel with your friends, family, and social media platforms. Thank you.
My guest today, Ms. Jagmeet Sangha, is a board-certified behavioral analyst with a master's in education leadership from Sacramento State University and a bachelor's in sociology from the University of California, Davis. With over a decade of experience providing applied behavioral analysis services, she has worked in homes and schools to support children, educators, and caregivers through training consultations. Jagmeet is deeply committed to educating the community and ensuring families can access high-quality behavioral intervention services. As the founder of Behavior Pivot Consulting, she utilizes the principles of organizational behavioral management and acceptance and commitment training to foster workplace well-being and advance individual and organizational development. Her work focuses on creating neuro-inclusive communities by identifying and building on individual strengths, promoting self-advocacy, and providing person-centered solutions that enhance workplace wellness. Ms. Sangha, welcome and thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
And to kind of jump right into it, can you share your journey to becoming a board-certified behavioral analyst and how you became involved in pursuing this field?
Yeah, I think it was a calling. Back when I was actually even finishing my master's, I had no idea that this field existed. And I knew that I wanted to work with kids. I was on my way to be a counselor. I had enrolled in an educational leadership program at Sacramento State, getting my master's in that. And around the same time, I was teaching in a preschool, and there were two children in my classroom that had autism, and the family didn't really have any services or support, and so they were working with me and one other teacher on site on supporting these students. And so that was my first kind of general introduction. And then I, found a job back then on Craigslist, and it was an entry-level behavior tech position. And within the first day, I met somebody now is one of my best friends. She said, "Oh, you should go to school for this." And I said, "Oh, I like school. Sure, maybe I'll register for classes." And I did, and took my exam, and just have been in love with the field since then, learning more, continuing to learn, continuing to take courses, and that's my journey within the field.
Awesome. And how did your education in sociology and educational leadership influence your approach to working with autistic individuals and their family? Because I'm sure, it would have been different than starting there right away.
Yeah, I think that it definitely provides a foundation, because I didn't do, an undergrad or graduate degree in applied behavior analysis, which is way more common and a little bit more mandatory these days. Back then, like I said, you didn't even need a relevant degree to get your bcba at that point. You just needed kind of your coursework. But I think that it provided a lot of foundation for me, sociology being as broad it is excuse me, as it is. And it really kind of speaks to my values in terms of my commitment to the community. I've always felt a sense of wanting to contribute. Right before we started, you shared a little bit about your background and the way that you, so early in your professional career are, already invested in community service and wanting to build that community and, have providing access to information. And that definitely aligns with what I feel that my values are as well. And especially with educational leadership, that supported me a lot in the work that I do in organizational behavior management. And we can talk about that in a minute, but it's a lot more kind of structured, taking the science of ABA, which is typically known to be provided in, with children, maybe with autism, but it's not limited to that. It's much more expansive. And OBM specifically refers to organizational kind of companies and workplaces. And so that foundation really supported me within that learning.
Thank you. And to get into like kind of the more technical questions, what are brain-based differences and how do they contribute to enhanced performance for individuals?
Yeah, I mean, none of us look the same. We don't have the same, fingerprints. None of our brains are the same. And so when we're talking about the diversity within our minds, the neurodiversity, we have to realize that exists and we can't move away from that. And so expecting everyone to have the same experience or the same answer or the same behaviors, that is not realistic. That is not something that we actually want to be promoting. And so when we have these creative ideas, when we have innovation, it's coming from minds that are looking at the problem differently, when they're asking different questions than somebody next to them. And that's what companies really rely on. And so when we're looking within the workplace, a lot of times people are saying, we're looking for thought leaders, we're looking for innovation, we're looking for creativity. And then you kind of go into this kind of system or this organization. It's like, nope, these are our processes. This is what you're going to follow. This is how we're going to do this. And, we see that a little bit in our education system. We see that in our general society of this is how everyone is kind of doing it. This is the only right way. So starting to shift from that, and there's a lot more awareness, I would say, within the last 5 to 7 years around this concept of neurodiversity, which is not a new concept at all, but a lot more awareness of how do we understand these differences that we all have that are brain-based? How do we understand that our environment can shape how we're going to promote some of these differences in a positive way and in a negative way? And how do we kind of create more opportunities for people to be more authentic and be able to contribute in that way?
And in your experience, what are the key benefits of applied behavior analysis?
Applied behavior analysis is a science for learning. So how do we create an environment that's going to, first of all, for us to even understand how learning and behavior happens? How do we create that environment so we can further or enhance that learning, shape some of that behavior? And so when we're using this science, we can use it in a very structured kind of format where, you're working one-to-one with a child or an individual and you're practicing certain skills. But if you kind of zoom out of that, applied behavior analysis is really what allows all of us, we are very complex individuals, all of us to kind of navigate the world. And so when we use our calendars to dictate our lives and our days, otherwise I would never get to any place on time. I would not remember. But that is a tool. That's a strategy from the ABA toolbox of using a visual, using a reminder, using a calendar. When we're following traffic laws, we have consequences if we don't follow traffic laws. That is the science of ABA. And so when we're using the science more consciously, we can say, okay, yeah, we're practicing ABA or we're doing this, but really all of us we're all kind of responding to the contingencies around us in our environment. So what's reinforcing, we want to do more of, what happens after a certain behavior? Are we doing things for attention, like posting on social media and we get a bunch of likes and we want to continue to post? And so all of us are kind of controlled by some of those principles.
When you're providing these ABA services in homes and schools, what challenges do you often encounter and how do you address them?
Yeah, I think there's a host of challenges. Number one is training. And so getting everyone on the same page in terms of, what ABA is, how are we going to execute maybe a behavior plan that's been written. There's, in the home setting, you're working with parents, and I have 2 children, but ABA does not work when I'm applying it to my children. There's too many emotions involved in that. And so, there's so many different ways that I have to, step out from being a parent and understand, okay, this is what's, this is why this behavior is happening. How do I, use some of the science like ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, on myself of how do I manage the situation? How do I manage my own emotions, my own response to what's going on right now to better and more neutrally support my child or create this environment that is going to help them in that scenario. I think within schools, there's a lot of wonderful, wonderful experts that are working together, and sometimes, sometimes people are not on the same page for various different reasons. So again, it can be there's a lot of burnout. You have a child with high frequency, high intensity behaviors, working with a teacher or an aide, for the entire day, and there can be a lot of burnout there. And so when we kind of go in and create these plans, sometimes, we have to be very strategic of, something that we want to create may not work, and how do we create something that is going to be more sustainable? And so I think that the key part here is really that being able to work with others, being able to work in that interdisciplinary team, understanding perspectives, where the parents are coming from, where the family is coming from. It's really important to consider those factors.
Why do you believe community education is essential in supporting families and individuals with autism?
I mean, education, period, any type of awareness of, how do I support myself? What is it that my child needs? Right before we started, we talked a little bit about specifically the South Asian Indian community. So my family and I am from India, and there's not a lot of talk of autism within the Punjabi community. There's not a lot of resources available for a child or a family that's struggling with behavioral challenges or any type of neurodiversity that may be considered outside of normal behavior. There's a lot of stigma there. And so just like for anybody else, being able to get educated and say, this is something that my child is doing, or this is something that I'm struggling with, and it's not a bad thing. I just need to know how to manage that. And that really is a general statement. And so parents are struggling, schools are struggling, adults are struggling. Post-COVID, we're seeing a lot of struggle within that kind of mental health kind of realm. And understanding where those struggles come from, understanding maybe the functions of those behaviors, understanding why we respond to certain things can really, really help individuals. And so that starts with community education. It doesn't start with forcing someone into ABA or saying, hey, this is what you need to do. It just starts with, hey, this is an option. This is something that's available, or this is what this looks like, this journey looks like. And so as you raise that awareness, as you disseminate that information, you naturally have individuals, asking, becoming curious, and understanding if that's going to be a good fit for them.
And could you also tell us about behavioral pivot consulting and the vision behind your organization?
Yeah, I Behavioral Pivot on November 1st, in just 2 weeks. It'll be my 2-year anniversary for this organization, so I'm very excited for that. I have been in the field for a long time, worked for a really wonderful large organization where mostly we did early intervention and supported children of all ages all the way up to early adulthood. And I was starting to notice that once a child is becoming a young adult and an adult, they were still not ready, or the world was still not ready to receive them in the workplace setting. And so there is this kind of steep cliff and this cutoff for somebody that's received therapy, let's say, most of their life, and they have ABA, which is fantastic. We've been fighting for this last, couple of decades for early intervention, and that's starting to happen. And there's a lot more awareness there. But what happens to individuals where they've done all of the work and yet they cannot find employment because employers still are not ready to interview someone that maybe doesn't appear to be a cultural fit for them, maybe someone that's not making eye contact, or they're rocking back and forth, or they're not able to engage in a Zoom interview, or any of those kind of reasons. Or once they do hire someone, that individual is not able to, meet deadlines or KPIs or anything that's happening within the organization. And so the vision behind Behavior Pivot was to begin education on the employer side and have employers be more aware and understand their unconscious bias in terms of what autism specifically is. And so I talk to them about neurodiversity in general, but very specifically because my background is within autism. That's kind of what I use as examples of these are the ways that it would actually benefit your organization if you bring on individuals that have these neurodiversities, these brain-based differences to help your company get innovative and advance.
That's amazing. And to kind of expand on that, what kind of approaches do you take to create these neuro-inclusive workspaces? And what results have you observed?
Yeah, I've done a host of workshops for really small organizations where there's maybe just a handful of employees to really large organizations, to companies where they have employee resource groups that are dedicated to understanding neurodiversity within the workplace, and they want these tools and the teams are working together. I've done a lot of kind of networking within the local Chamber of Commerce and talking about these topics and bringing these workshops there. So I'm getting a variety of different employers that are having a little bit easier access to like, oh, this is something I've not considered before. And it's been exciting to see the response. And so typically, when I'm hosting this kind of these workshops, people come in saying, I don't even know what neurodiversity is, or I'm here for the food and drinks today in this workshop, but this is not even relevant to me in my company. And by the end of the workshop, it is completely relevant. They understand the relevance. They're able to identify either themselves or somebody on their team, having various different kind of needs. And, I've done some partnerships with local adult school programs that have paid internship opportunities. And we've had multiple employers say, raise their hand and say, we want to be an employer that's a part of this program where we can actually invite individuals that receive an internship at our place of employment. And then we can, support them if they might be a good fit, maybe provide some employment opportunities. So it's been exciting to see that there is a want, and it went from 2 years ago on November 1st, and I was saying neurodiversity in the workplace, and people were like, I don't know what that means, to almost 2 years later, people know exactly what that means, and they are still trying to navigate that journey of how to create that within their workplace.
And how do you also integrate organizational behavior management and acceptance and commitment training into your work with individuals and organizations?
Yeah, so OBM, kind of what I touched on, is organizational behavior management. It is ABA applied to organizations. So it's the same science of learning, science of behavior, why we do things, how do we create environments so we can do more of some things, less of other things. And it's that same science that we applied to the workplace. And so earlier this year, I think I took a course on supportive employment, and the entire course I was being retaught ABA, and I found it very humorous that I'm sitting in this course and they're saying, hey, there's this science that talks about ABCs of behavior, antecedent behavior, and consequence. And it was exciting for me to hear about ABA in a completely different lens, in a setting or in a population where most of the class members hadn't heard of it before, weren't applying this science. And so I use that science when I do these workshops. And so when I'm talking about how do we increase neurodiversity, how do we create meetings to be more successful, how do we create more efficiency around communication, all of this within the workplace, I'm using OBM, and I'm teaching those concepts of what are these OBM strategies that can be applied. And they're typically very practical. We do lots of hands-on training. It's not just me talking like this because I can talk for hours. But usually it's small group, let's practice this, let's model it, let's, put it out there. And then ACT also, comes from this idea that how do we create that self-awareness and understand where our own kind of I would say triggers, but kind of our own awareness where we are as we approach that situation. How do we stay committed to our values? How do we stay in the present moment? It's a lot of kind of overlap with emotional intelligence, a lot of the soft skills that we typically need within our lives, not just within the workplace, but within our lives. And I tie that a lot back to, my own kind of upbringing in a Punjabi household within being a Sikh. There's a lot of overlap there. I actually did a presentation a couple of months ago on that overlap with Emotional Intelligence, ACT, and Sikhi. And ACT really is that. It's brought by Eastern, belief systems in terms of how do we use these, dimensions to become more self-aware, understand how we're perceiving the world, and how we can show up more committed to what's important to us.
And to tie all of that back, like, all of those, really cool things that you just said, back to your view on brain-based differences, what strategies do you recommend for promoting workplace well-being and inclusion, for neurodiverse individuals?
I think the first thing that everyone needs to do, first of all, we're all neurodiverse. So neurodiversity is something that we all are. All of our brains are different. Neurodivergent may be someone that has may received a label like autism, ADHD, dyslexia. So no matter where you kind of fall within that, the first thing to consider is your self-awareness. What are the things that you are really good at? What are the things that are bringing you joy? What are the things that you want to be doing more of? Because that can help you create environments where you find yourself doing those types of things. And then what are the things that you cannot do? What are the things that you really struggle with that are bringing you a lot more anxiety when you're thinking about getting up and having to do those things? And for those things, how do you create environments that you can either figure out, you get some support around, you build some systems, maybe you delegate some of that stuff. Maybe it's stuff that you actually don't need to do and somebody can help you do that. And so the first piece here is self-awareness. And from that, you can create, self-advocacy where you can then show up more confidently and say, hey, this is something that I'm going to help this organization, or this is how I can contribute in the home because I'm really good at mowing the lawn, but I am not good at folding those clothes, or I'm really good at, leading these meetings, but I'm not going to be good at writing the agenda. So being able to really understand your needs and then advocating and communicating those needs clearly, so that way your team and the people that depend on you can understand where those boundaries are, and they can then fill in the blanks and help support you with that.
How do you see the landscape of autism advocacy evolving in the next few years?
Yeah, there's been a lot of advocacy, a lot of involvement kind of happening, and which is really exciting because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we used to do talks in the classroom and say, back then we were recruiting for ABA, and we'd go into college classrooms and say, who's heard of ABA? And nobody would raise their hand. And who's heard of autism? Maybe 3 people would raise their hand. And now you go into a classroom, who's heard of ABA? The entire class has heard of it. Even if it's not a psychology class, like people are hearing about this. Who's heard of autism? Every single person has heard of autism. And that's just within this last decade. And so you're going from 0 to 60 so fast there. And then you also have amazing, incredibly intelligent self-advocates that are speaking up and saying, this is my autistic journey. This is my lived experience. This is how, what my kind of thoughts or feedback or, all of these things are. And that is really important for service providers, because if we're not taking that in, we're not going to be able to meet those individual needs. And ABA is meant to be individual, whether you're working with a student, whether you're working with an employee, it's meant to be individualized in how you create those goals and how you create support structures. And so being kind of in this space of like going from nobody knowing what this work is to the other extreme of people really knowing what it is and being authentic and saying, hey, this is what I need to be successful. It's really, really an exciting time. And it's our responsibility as service providers to be aware of that, to understand it, to take it in, and also to evolve ourselves and say, hey, this is how I used to do things. And this is now, given the new research, given the new information, be educated and respond to that.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. Like, insights into the future, I guess. And another thing I want to ask about the future is, are there any other upcoming projects or initiatives you're excited about that, you're doing or that you're going to be a part of?
Yeah, I actually started running some group workshops for individuals that are seeking employment. So I'm located in the Bay Area in California, and I've done most of these in person, but I actually have several clients that I meet virtually that are kind of all over. And so these workshops are really exciting because we meet as a group. I use a lot of ACT, so we identify, what are our goals related to finding employment. What are your strengths? What are, some areas that you need support in? And so within that group, we are starting to create these communities where people are finding one another that maybe have similar or different interests in employment. They're supporting one another. I facilitate these groups. And then in some scenarios, I'm actually having some employers come in and do some mock interviews. So that way it's a two-way learning. It's, an opportunity for my workshop participants to practice how to do interviews, but it's also an opportunity for the employers to practice how to interview somebody that's neurodivergent. And so being able to kind of create some pathways and open up some pathways, and then create some community and some awareness around, what these ideas are and how we can be working together towards them.
What advice would you give to parents of children recently diagnosed with autism regarding behavioral intervention services?
The first advice is get the assessments and advocate for your child. Get them the help as quickly as possible and get yourself the help as quickly as possible. Being a parent is not easy at all. And all of us have our unique challenges in terms of what that looks like. And so whatever supports that you can get yourself early on, that is going to be very important. And again, that's going to vary from parent to parent. And the second advice I would say, I think you only asked me for one, but I do have two. The second is to involve your child early on. The concept of self-determination, of the child really understanding that, hey, this is an IEP meeting that's held for me. This is, these are my goals that I'm, being involved in. And, if they're really young, they're not going to be able to really understand these concepts, but they're still involved and you're still practicing the motion because they're going to go from 4 to 14 to 24 with a blink of an eye. And you cannot start when they're 24 to get them involved and get their buy-in on their goals and, aspirations and what they want to do. That is going to take a long time. So when you get them started early to get them involved in their own program, building their program, it might not be that they're not going to set a goal of, oh, I need to do homework every day or I need to, follow the instructions, but maybe making that homework of what do you like to do first? And so asking those questions, getting them the choices, allowing them to, do hard things very early on in age, that is going to only help them and create more independence in the long run. So really kind of focusing on those things are very important.
How do you think individuals and organizations a person to a whole organization can get involved in creating more inclusive environments?
I think we're moving towards that. I think that we can get involved by each one of us becoming more aware of what we need and then being able to communicate that. I think that organizations naturally have to respond to what the employees are kind of asking for. And so it has to start with you. It has to start with saying, hey, this is something that I need support with. This is something, these are my strengths. And how do we create those environments? So if all of us kind of go within and focus on our own selves and our own immediate impact, I think that that would tremendously make a difference, because oftentimes we're looking at, fixing others, fixing the system, fixing this or something that's unreachable and unattainable. But we ourselves, are never really the project that we're working on. So how do we work on our own selves? And then how do we also understand, like, we are great the way that we are. There's so many behaviors that we don't need to change. We just need to enhance the behaviors that are making us better people. And that goes for any type of neurodiversity, because so often we're told of all of the lack and all of the behaviors that are inappropriate. And so we have to begin to change that narrative.
For my last question, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
I'm really excited and proud of you for this initiative that you're taking on. I really am grateful, that you reached out to talk about this. I think that individuals like you and what we're doing right here is an absolute game changer and is putting us in the pathway to make these changes that you're looking for. And I think that it's really, really wonderful what you're doing. And I wish you and your community all the best with this.
Thank you, Ms. Sangha. I want to kind of say the same thing towards you. Thank you so much for doing this wonderful conversation, and congratulations for everything you've accomplished so far and for everything you're going to accomplish. Thank you so much.
Thank you.